Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of Healing Brothers Present. It is time to deal with the pain. I'm one of your co-hosts, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the legendary Sam Simmons. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing all right, and it's almost 60. I think it is 60 degrees outside. It's pretty good for March, late March here in Minnesota. So I'll take the sunshine and weather. And it's my mom's birthday. Happy birthday to my mom. So
Oh, happy birthday, moms.
yes,
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Another trip around the sun.
Yeah, yeah.
And during our journeys around the sun, we deal with so many different obstacles and things that end up happening. And with today's episode, we're going to focus on one of those things that we both have, discovered, but I think we've always felt and known for quite some time before there was a label put on it, which is racial battle fatigue. Racial battle fatigue. And based on what I know, racial battle fatigue, that term was coined by Dr. William Smith, who is a professor out of the University of Utah. And he coined this term in the early 2000s as he was writing and doing work with Black professionals, mainly, who are in these collegiate spaces and the things that they experience as professors and staff and faculty. And then the term kind of took off from there to look at just Black people in general and the things that Black people encompass, but especially Black folks who find themselves in predominantly white institutions. So, like many researchers, he worked with a lot of college students, getting feedback from them about their experiences as they attended predominantly white institutions. And I think it highlights a reality that so many different people face on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we're going to get into today. What has been your experience with racial battle fatigue, Sam?
Oh, shoot. I got a long history of racial battle fatigue, but um, been able to navigate it fairly well. Uh, it's really um, probably a little bit real clear when you're talking about being in a place like Minnesota. I call it, how do you sustain your blackness in white spaces, is really what I call it when I talk about, that's the title of one of my presentations. Um, it's almost like being gaslit. you know you know something ain't right, something is feeling discriminatory, or you're experiencing microaggressions or racial microaggressions. Let's keep it clear, right? And then people telling you either uh, uh, trying to give you the impression that didn't happen. What is the big deal? Um, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Uh, those kind of things. You feel it, you see it, you can describe it, but at the same time, you have no place to deal with it, right? Especially in environment, like I said, especially in environments of you're trying to be in white spaces, and there's other kind of fatigues that deals with racial battle fatigue that is not always in white spaces, okay, which doesn't get talked about very much. You know what I'm saying? Uh, 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 it could be in what we would call people of color spaces too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Various different groups, because we know America has doubled and tripled down on this thing called black. To
Mm-hmm.
the point where they don't even know how to say it, but you can experience it with other cultural groups as well. And we can say that battle racial fatigue can be experienced by other folks from different racial groups as well. But the big piece is having this experience in an environment that says it cares. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is it came up um in on my radio show on Friday. We had two courageous black teachers come on the show talking about the current teacher strike going on
Mm-hmm.
here in Minneapolis. And one of the things they talked about is that the teachers union is talking about they want to support more black teachers. They want, to be in the classroom, not, not have them be let go at a higher rate, because they know it's been proven when you have more teachers of color in the classroom, kids do better uh, uh, statistically, and not just, ironically, not just black kids do better, or kids of color, all kids, because you got this other kind of experience that these kids are having, and how they feel like the teachers union is reneging on that promise in terms of making it be part of this collective bargaining or part of the negotiations of the strike. But at the same time, so that's the union, and then they're saying at the same time you have the school system that says they're going to be more inclusive and all these other kind of things, and they're not seeing it, right? It's not improving. And so, again, when I talk about being gaslit, again, trying to tell you what you seeing ain't real, um, and got you, it's like feeling like you losing your mind, right? And so, um, and and the ideal of what emotionally and physically these women were describing what they were experiencing in terms of being in these environments, right?
Mhm.
One was talking about, since she's been in this environment of being a teacher in the Minneapolis school system, she's that been diagnosed with a issue that is definitely attached to high stress levels, and how uh, uh, blood pressure for teachers go up and those kind of things. And that's just in general, but for black teachers, even higher, which means that there need to be more information looked at in terms of that kind of thing. But go along with that is that how we have a tendency as black people sometimes not to be as attentive to our own needs when we're dealing with our people,
Mhm.
right? Because the interesting question that was asked before we ended the show: what are you doing to take care of yourself? And they started laughing
Mhm.
because they barely could come up with an answer,
Mhm.
right? So you talking about racial battle fatigue? Racial battle fatigue is also increased by the way we have been conditioned to sacrifice ourselves for others, and especially uh, yeah, sacrifice ourselves for others, because we're so into um, doing for others than self care, to the point where it's been counterproductive, and we don't even know, without guilt, to take time out, to step back and take care of ourselves.
Right.
So there's layers to this, but it's and then if we add on top of that, look at all these layers. If we add on top of that, they talked about being black teachers in Minneapolis on strike, being gaslit, they feel, by their union, talking about, we're gonna throw this into the negotiations, and now they've been backing off on it at the same time in terms of increasing pay for black for the actual support services of the schools, which have a tendency to be in the BIPOC individuals, and actually more black individuals as the support staff, trying to get more money for them as well, right? So you have the dealing with folks telling you what you're seeing and what you're feeling ain't real, dealing with the fact that you feel guilty about taking care of yourself, or you don't really understand what that means, and then you live in a community that's catching hell and feeling unsafe in terms of dealing with the police system, right?
Mhm.
And living and when you live in the community and seeing the loss of young people, right?
Right.
And so you have that. So we're talking about three layers of this
Hmm.
being experienced
Hmm. Let,
in this environment.
mhm. Let's take one of those. Let's take each layer at a time, so we can really do a deep dive for folks to understand what we're talking about when it comes to racial battle fatigue. So, let's paint the scenario of these teachers. Let's say, I grew up in a fairly decent neighborhood. There's some stuff happening here and there. I never really gotten in trouble. I went off to school, got my degree in education, started my career at the Minneapolis public school system. Let's say I'm a fourth grade teacher. Been teaching fourth grade now for about 4 years. I'm 28 years old. I'm from Minnesota, born and raised in Brooklyn Center. Had to pretty much try to have as much diversity as I can in my little area in Brooklyn Center. Went on, got my degree. Now I'm teaching fourth grade. I'm right smack dab in the middle of North Minneapolis. Now here I am. We're on strike. I agree that we should be on strike, but at the same time, I have a lot of other frustrations about things that are going on in the school system. How does racial battle fatigue, from your perspective, show up for me?
Well, again, we are as a people are pretty loyal when we make up our mind to be part of things, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And so you're trying to be supportive of the strike, but at the same time, you have other additional needs that your white counterparts don't have when it
Mm.
comes to doing this work,
Yeah. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And on top of that, you have if depending on your relationship with the community is looking at you you have a different responsibility to the community as
Hmm.
well. Is you're looked at as being the one who's supposed to look after our children inside
Mm.
this system that we see is not always fair to our children statistically, right?
Like a
And
guardian
so,
angel.
huh?
Like a guardian angel.
Right. And so
Mm.
you have that pressure, right? And then again, you have this pressure that of trying to represent what is good in terms of teachers because you wanted to be a teacher, but you're not always feeling like you're being supported by the union. So what do?
Right.
Right? I'm like I said on the radio show, we've been talking about the strike. We ended up talking about the strike 2 weeks in a row. The first week, we couldn't get no teachers to come on and talk about the strike.
Hmm.
But these teachers got so frustrated. They said, "Well, we need to tell our truth,"
Hmm.
which they should be commended on. But the pressure is hard, and they also talked about the fact that being on strike financially is really, really having a major effect on them.
Mm. Yeah. Now, yeah, especially now because they just hit. I think they got paid last week for the work that was covered before the strike. Now it's strike work time, so them checks ain't coming.
Right. The checks ain't coming. A lot of and I'm and I can't give you the right numbers on this necessarily, but a lot of the teachers, a lot of teachers and a lot of the probably the black teachers don't have a second income coming in the house to be able to do this strike piece, right? And then you got people in the community who are saying, why don't y'all just go back to work? Because
Mm.
our kids already behind. Our kids is already catching hell. We just got off of COVID, where our kids didn't do well on the lockdown from the schools, technology wise, and which put them behind even more. So that's even more pressure on that teacher. And so
Mm.
now, especially here in Minnesota, because they're a black teacher and they could, that now they got to now that I'm quite sure, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, there's other teachers and other school districts trying to pick them off.
Mm. Yeah, come work for us.
Yeah.
Mm. And we'll pay you a little bit more.
Huh?
We'll pay you a little bit more too.
Right.
Mm.
So think about that. Think about that one. You know, uh, 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 you know it's overwhelming. I commend them. I don't know how you do it, right? And then again, then that ain't even counting on, like I mentioned before, the pressure that the community itself is putting on teachers, but teachers of color in particular, about getting back to work because our kids, and just the pressure they were having in terms of dealing with trying to protect black kids and trying to work with black families even when the school was running. So
Yeah. Mm.
but you're the professor, you know more about that than I do. I'm just a poor old black man. I'm trying to do the old black man thing.
You have way more wisdom than years that I have teaching on any level. So there you go.
Yeah, well, don't get it twisted. Just because I'm old don't mean I got much wisdom. Because I can give you some examples of who is old and ain't got much wisdom, probably.
I didn't say anything much of being old. Insecurity. I say you got more wisdom than I have years in teaching. I say nothing about age.
Yeah, you know how when people start thinking about that wisdom thing, they be thinking about that age thing. And I am old, so I should be proud to be an old black man in good health.
Oh man, yeah, absolutely. I feel for the educators. I think they're in a really tough spot. I feel that I'm hearing a lot of counter narratives to the teachers being striking. I think it's really just parents being frustrated that their kids are at home and they have, we've already dealt with this through the pandemic, and now here we are where things are loosening up, but kids are at home and they're out of school. But I've worked in the schools for years. Most of my counseling experience has been either school linked or school based mental health, and the conditions are just what they are. I think we're really at a pivotal moment in time where we have to rethink how education is done, and part of the teachers' kind of demands are to support their efforts so they can actually do their jobs and teach. A lot of these teachers can't teach because the behavioral issues are through the roof, and they're saying we don't have the resources to keep up. One of the demands were more mental health services. Well, why do you need more mental health services? Because the behaviors are all out of whack, and the teachers are not mental health practitioners. A lot of these schools have added additional teaching staff in the classrooms, which is also not helping. The classrooms are overcrowded, so they're in a tough spot. And I think this is an opportunity for the district and the school board to relook at, okay, what can we do differently? How do we move education, into the current century where we're at and move it forward? How do we reduce these class sizes? How do we increase our workforce? It's one thing to say we need more black teachers, but if black folks ain't going to get education degrees, what are we talking about? Like we need to think about the path and the how to make sure that the supply can meet the demand. Because I don't know a bunch of black folks that are lining up to be teachers. Do you?
No.
Exactly.
And
what are we complaining about?
And unfortunately, a lot of folks who did go to school to be teachers, right, got picked off by major corporations and organizations, and then how do you do that? When you do that, depending on the community, they're gonna give you hell for doing that, right? You didn't care, and you left us, and all this other kind of stuff. Again, going back to how do I balance taking care of myself and doing right by the community or right by black children,
which is really the flip side of racial battle fatigue. See, typically when racial battle fatigue is talked about, it's talked about how we are trying to navigate and survive living in a system of white supremacy and in majority white spaces. But what people don't talk about is that other side of the coin of racial battle fatigue, which is showing up for community when sometimes it's against your best interest. And what are you supposed to do when that happens, right? So you can't fault the educator who has they might have a master's degree or whatever, and some organizations say, hey, come work for us and do this teaching, same teaching you're doing, probably less work, less of a headache, and make damn near double the money, if not, a significant percentage more. You can't fault that individual for doing that, but then they feel guilty because they quote unquote left the community. They're not working in the schools, or they go work for a different school district, or they join administration because there's not a lot of us, but we have enough brain knowledge and skill set and talents where people want to utilize that. And that's a tough space to be in. I mean, I can even say for myself that I've kind of been in that space just in the mental health world, being a younger black male therapist, like that meant something. And then by me not doing therapy anymore, that's a huge blow to the field. That's taking someone out who can help, further the opportunities for people in the community. But to be honest with you, that shit was stressful. That was some stressful work, man. And I'll never forget. You told me before I went to grad school the second time, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because you don't need to." And you're like, "There's a reason why." You didn't tell me what the reason was, so you said I'll find out. But you said there's a reason why I don't do individual sessions with people. And I learned one of the reasons why is, and I don't know if this is your answer. This is what I discovered was it gets to a point where you don't know which direction to take anymore. It's not a fork in the road. It's just a dead end. And you work with folks over and over and over, and then you realize very quickly that there are forces beyond what you could do in a one-on-one session that are holding this person behind or holding this person back. And if they don't get it, if they don't understand how they need to navigate around or through that, then you've exhausted all your opportunities with them, which then you start to look at yourself as a practitioner, saying, how do I help push these people, push these people through? And it starts to weigh on you because you can only do so much in a one-on-one session. I think the same thing happens with educators, where they show up for these young people every day, but then they have to deal with, 3 or 4 students who are just having these extreme behavioral issues. They can't even get their lessons done. They already don't have enough resources in the class to teach their lessons. So like I'm talking about like textbooks and like things like that, the things that they need to get the work done. Then they got 30 students in the classroom that you're trying to navigate with. Then and then you got like 45 to 53 minutes to teach. Like that is difficult. That is a very difficult day. And it's a very stressful. And it's hard to really feel like you've made the impact that you thought you were gonna make when you're under those types of conditions over and over and over.
Well, but you got to add on top of that, you working inside of a system that um, don't support you, right? And don't offer you
Right.
the support and in some cases, support that you have identified, right? You have identified that could be fixes for not just kids of color, but kids in general. And then you start finding out all they wanted you to do is be black and show up and not much more. You hear what I said? Be black
Yeah, that's
and show
ridiculous.
up and not much more.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we're talking about school right now, but this is not, I'm running into this same thing in terms of every organization I have some interaction with. I bring up, they say, well, Sam, what kind of presentations do you do? And I deliberately always bring up sustaining blackness in white spaces, and they'll get real quiet. And depending on, and the person who's always contacting me ain't the person who's in charge, right? And that person will get quiet and says, honestly, we can use that.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about it. Now, and usually it's a white individual I'm talking to. So if they can see it, that black folks are feeling it. If they can see it, right? Or because it's really about, those dumb questions that you said, we can't keep black staff. No, you can't keep black staff because you're terrorizing them. Right? You want them to show up, be black, and be quiet. Just do your job. We don't want you to come in here, your title is diversity officer, but we don't want you to do anything. We just want you to show up and be black and show your face when we want you to. Right?
Right.
Especially in this environment, because that's, we love words. Diversity officer, and we got a diverse staff. And the diverse staff, I work for places that got a diverse staff, ain't got black person in black person the first in the organization. Right? Because they include all kind of stuff as diversity, but they ain't got a black person on the staff and working with over 40% black folks, but they ain't got, but they tout themselves as being diverse. Okay. So again, not only do the staff get gaslit, but the community get gaslit.
Hmm.
Like you can't see, like you boo boo the foo. Okay, and so it's catching up with a lot of people, right?
Hmm.
Let me see. I'm gonna bring something up. Let me right quick. So, this is, kind of the definition of of the racial battle fatigue. But it's really about constantly facing being racially dismissed, demeaned. Folks being hostile in a hostile environment as an individual, and then some of it is subtle and some of it is straight outright. But the piece I want to get to is this piece here, the consequences of all of this. These are literally some of the consequences that people experience, and they don't even realize this is what they don't have a word for it. So when I talk about it in a presentation, right, um they say, oh wow, that's me, I'm going through that, right? So we're talking about something that is harmful to one's physical and emotional health, period. And yeah, there's the whole thing around the and think about this. If you're going through all of this and you're going through all this in your workspace, how do you think that's affecting your home space? Right? And we're already at a situation where we're having all these are also contributes to some of these health disparities that we see within our community and in our families. So you said you wanted to break down the layers. What was the other layer?
Oh, I thought you had those listed out. Well, I think like I said, one of the layers is that flip side of representing and showing up in the community is definitely a layer. Definitely a layer to it. But I think that also another layer of racial battle fatigue is that well-being piece and how do we take care of ourselves. And I think one of the things that has taken place is that a lot of people have been caught into the what I call the self-care trap. And what I mean by that is a lot of people have looked at self-care as just a reactionary action. So something bad happens in my life and now I need to do yoga or do my breathing exercises or drink my fancy tea or get my steps in on my Fitbit and do and all that good stuff. But one of the things that we have to do is be proactive with our self-care as well, something that I call sustainable wellness. And how do we take care of ourselves before the tough stuff takes place? Like a lot of like since we're using the teacher example for today, a lot of teachers know that they work in some toxic environments. A lot of teachers know that they have challenges. They know which class periods are their challenge or which coworker is a challenge for them. Which day of the week is the worst. A lot of people know these things that cause them stress, but instead of taking proactive actions to address them and deal with them, a lot of people don't, and then they wait for that that foot to drop, that boot to drop on them before they do something. And I think moving forward for everyone, we have to be more proactive with making sure we're taking care of ourselves and looking at wellness as a journey and not as something that we need to meet when stress shows up in our life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is unfortunately within our community, we haven't done a good job of making that okay, right? So again, when you're talking about the racial battle fatigue, is it's sometimes it's not just the battle with the systems; it's the battle with our own folks, right? In terms of being able to be, how do we support each other, right? And that's not always easy in our community in terms of how do we support each other because there's so much going on. Sometimes you don't know where to start. You just don't know where to start. And again, it's not just schools. It's in work. Uh, uh, and folks, in some cases, if they get depressed and they get stuck, they just show up. that's put in their time, right? And we know, at least a lot of the organizations I'm working with are organizations that work with people. Think about that. They work with people. And so if they just show up, that's not benefiting the clients. So that's another level of issues for the clients, because you gave that scenario of the individual who goes to school to be an educator. They get out of school, they're gun ho, and if they're a person of color, a black person, they might have went to school to get their degree so they can come back and help their folks, right? And so the motivation is there. That motivation is a little different than a person who goes to school and then come back and their motivation is money. The motivation is very different, right? So you're going to end up being more aware of what's going on. And if you're dealing in a community that the people that the clients that you're dealing with look like you, come from backgrounds like you end up not only suffering what we call racial trauma fatigue, but what we call parallel trauma. And that parallel trauma is the trauma that you experience because your trauma is very similar to the clients you're dealing with, right? So again, you're going to be more aware of things, right? The other problem with that is if you don't step back and pay attention to that parallel trauma, then you get easily triggered. And that being easily triggered can go either way, right? Where you get triggered in a way where you don't have no boundaries with the clients, right? And so you don't have boundaries with the clients. I just had an organization that had this big issue with their client, a couple of their clients of color. No, the clients of color, a couple of their staff of color thought that they should give the clients of color their home phone number and thought that was okay.
Uh-oh, compassion fatigue alert.
Oh no, that's the compassion fatigue is that you can call it that. I call it overdoing it in parallel trauma, because compassion fatigue, as I see it, is when you just get to the point where you just don't give a damn. Okay, so I see it the other way around, but again, you are done over invested in the clients, and they might not be getting all of what they need, or you are so invested that you done lost the idea that there got to be boundaries. And some of the staff never knew nothing about boundaries to start with. I mean, I've seen that, right? Where they had issues with boundaries already, but now you done gave out your number to clients calling you all time of night, whenever, and that kind of stuff. Because one of the things that I've learned in dealing with clients, if they're not used to getting attention, then all of a sudden you start showing them attention. Now everything's a crisis, right? And everything is more important than your life, right? And now you want to get mad at the clients, or now you're gonna lose your job because not only are you giving out your phone number, now you seeing clients in inappropriate places at inappropriate times, and then want to get mad when the people call you on it and say, well, they didn't care no way. Well, that might be true, but there's got to be some boundary somewhere,
right?
I had somebody cuss me out behind boundaries. I work with young people. I really care about young people. I said, okay, and that's good. And and my phone is on 24 hours a day for
I remember
my
this.
young people.
I was there.
Okay. And then my question was, Do your job call for you to be on 24-hour call? What do you mean? No, what I said. Does your job call for you to be on 24-hour call? No. Okay. So that means that you don't get paid for 24-hour call. Let me make this clear. No, I just care. Oh, okay. So if something happens to you, say you go out the house and you go get this young person or whatever, and something happens to you during that time, you do know you're not covered, right? You do know that, right? That's beside the point. I care. Oh, okay. I just want to know. And then this will be the same person who will complain that they don't get paid enough, right? I don't get paid well. I mean, do all this work, and in the organization, they be touting, they go in their little paperwork and their little advertisement. They'll put that person's picture all in the advertisement because they're successful, whatever that means, and that kind of stuff. And then they want to get mad because they ain't getting paid more.
Mm.
But you're doing stuff you ain't getting paid for.
Right.
So,
and you expect other people to recognize your additional effort.
Right.
I've run into this as a manager where I told my staff, if you expect me to pay for you doing extra stuff, then stop doing that stuff.
Right.
And their response to me was that they can't stop doing it. And I said, well, that's a personal problem.
But I can still not pay you.
Yeah, that's exactly. But that's what I told. I said, well, then it sounds like this is a personal issue,
Right.
and this ain't got nothing to do with your employment.
Right.
And they couldn't compute that in their head. They thought Brandon was just being a hater and stealing money. That I got accused of stealing money. That I'm like, how am I stealing money and I'm not getting paid anything extra? So you tell me I'm stealing your money? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. It was crazy.
Oh no, all of that is unreasonable. All of that is unreasonable.
What?
And that's where that's another one of those areas that contribute to some of the extra trauma, right? That parallel trauma.
Man.
Or the opposite side of that parallel trauma. Now dig this. And I've heard this before too, where you'll get the staff person who is embarrassed by the client's behavior and just snap on the clients. I mean, when I say snap on the clients, like you should know better. Black people don't act like this and that kind of stuff. And it's like, that does not call for you to act the way you're acting. Or, I mean, just outright curse out the clients. I'm not saying using curse words. There's two different things. I'm talking about curse out the client, challenge the client. Come on outside. I've seen staff call the client. Let's go outside and deal with this. It's like,
and these are black professionals, right? Are these black professionals or non-black?
Yeah, I'm not talking about black clients.
Talking about the professionals.
At least that's what they are on a piece of paper.
That's the time. Yeah, that's the category they're classified. It don't mean that's how they're behaving.
but again, it's about if you don't deal. That's the other difficulty in doing this work because there's so much trauma with the clients, with families, that we don't necessarily do a good job. And I don't expect the system to do a good job because the system they're not invested in a healthy way in regular staff, and you can imagine what they're not invested in staff of color in the way they should be. Because if I get invested in staff of color the way I should be, I might have to admit to my shortcomings. And Lord behold that, but that parallel trauma ends up oozing from the client to the staff. And there's this organization called, based on the sanctuary model, talks about parallel trauma oozing into the whole organization. Right? Everybody's acting out. The organization is acting out, the staff is acting out, and the clients are acting out.
Wow.
You know, so it brings us back to, why we started the podcast. That whole thing
Hmm.
around that core,
Hmm.
that trauma. You know.
Let me ask you a question.
Uh-oh.
When it let's give us your definition of boundaries. I think I've asked you this before on the podcast, but I think it's good to go revisit it because I think many people struggle with boundaries because they just have no damn idea what they are for them. What are your how do you define boundaries?
Why are you asking me all the hard questions? Remember, you're a
I can
professor.
answer. You want me to answer? I can answer the
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Why don't
So
you start?
I'll give you my answer. Then you respond to my answer. Let me know what you
Yeah,
think.
well, yeah.
Very
Don't be
simple
mistreating
definition.
the old man.
I'm just trying to pull out all that wisdom, man. Um, so for me, I think boundaries, how I define boundaries are the expectation that I have for how others are supposed to treat me and the expectation on how I am supposed to treat myself. And I think one of the key elements to this is that when we discover what our boundaries are, we need to figure out ways to constructively communicate them to other people and accept them for ourselves. And I think that most people struggle with boundaries because they don't define them until someone actually crosses a line that they might not necessarily knew was even there, and then it becomes a problem. And I think that's one of the worst times to kind of let somebody know that's a boundary of mine, especially if you have a rapport relationship built with them, because there's a harm done there. So, what do you think about that kind of explanation and definition of boundaries?
Well, the thing is that works for me. And the other piece is, I think the hard thing about boundaries is about uh being able to be uh individual but caring at the same time,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah, ha- being able to have having boundaries where um I can allow myself to let you know what's comfortable for me,
Hmm.
and recognize what is also comfortable for me to do with you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
um and that's the tough one, right? I have to allow you to be an individual where we partner but we don't overwhelm,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And part of that is knowing your own boundaries before so you can identify them with somebody else, right? um um where you know I I care but I don't want to control
Right.
at the same time, because that's where that codependency stuff come in,
Right.
right?
Right.
uh um um and so it's hard because we as black folks are a highly codependent people. Codependent people don't have much boundaries.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
um we are highly codependent because we almost needed it to survive as a group.
Mm. What do you mean almost? I think we did need it to survive. It's okay to accept that brutal truth.
Yeah,
We had to
well,
be codependent when we didn't want to in order
right,
for us to
right. Well,
survive.
we had to be codependent. We had to be codependent to survive collectively.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh.
So because the problem was whatever you did, I could be punished for.
Yep.
Okay. So that meant that I had to tolerate your craziness,
Yep.
right? So we could all survive,
Right.
right? If I, it's like, the system always talking about, well, the black folks don't trust us or whatever. Well, the thing is if I told on you to the system, instead of the system either dealing with you, uh they would not only deal with you, what they would do with you to a point where it would punish me at the same time,
Right.
right? Not be helpful, not show no compassion, right? So now I'm caught between the catch-22.
Right.
It's like having a child who's having a mental health episode, and I call the police, right? But the police come in, and instead of us, de-escalating the situation, they escalate it, and now
Even
my
further.
child is dead. That ain't what I
Yeah.
wanted.
Right.
And so our situation caused us to have to be contained in a toxic environment to survive, and not know what is my boundaries, what's my limits, right? It's like that
Define
whole
them.
thing about what we believe loyalty is, right?
Mm.
So if I go out and start a fight with you unnecessarily, if you don't back me up, you ain't my boy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Blindly,
Mm.
right? And then if you say no, I ain't doing that, man. I got too much to damn lose. Now you being selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Now you ain't down, and now you and the other people got a problem.
Right.
You know,
Mm.
there's an edge. There's a space where we separate me from you.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that separation when we talk about healthy boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
right? And where it allows me time to say no, and allows me to and being able to live with that. That don't mean it's comfortable,
Right.
especially if you come out of a family that had no boundaries there. Your stuff is my stuff, and my stuff is your stuff. It's like, a more easy example. I buy, get my first little job, and I live in the house. I go buy this beautiful shirt and beautiful pants. Next thing I come back, my brother and sister got it on.
Yeah.
And then what's even worse, when I complain to my parents, it's like, well, they
It,
don't have it like you.
yeah. It is what it is.
It
Just
is
let it
what it
be.
is. So you get, another that brings up another thing, is this whole thing about being punished for being successful
Mm.
in your family.
Mm.
So I'm doing well, and I'm doing well in the family, right? And
Yep.
every time the family has a problem, especially financially, they call me.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel guilty, so guilty, and say, well, they don't have it as good as I am. Why don't they have it as good as you?
Racial battle fatigue. It sounds like the flip side of racial battle fatigue.
Right. And so and so you got this family member who's always in trouble,
Mm-hmm.
right? Never got no money, always gonna. But you, not only do they call you, your mama call you. Baby,
To reinforce
Jim.
the ask.
Yeah. Right. Jimmy's having a hard time, and the parent will literally say, they didn't have it like you, but we
Mm.
grew up in the same damn family.
Mm.
Matter of fact, I'm the oldest in the same damn family,
Mm.
and I had to do certain things to have it like I have it. So you telling me I'm obligated to take care of everybody else because I made different choices?
Mm.
And I can't say no?
Wow.
Oh, heck no.
Wow.
And it's hard, because if you start doing that, and especially a family that really doesn't have very many boundaries, you're going to get disowned.
Yeah.
You're going to get disowned. You're going to get called all kind of names, and you're going to have to emotionally deal with that.
Mm.
And if you don't learn how to emotionally deal with that, you'll get sucked back in just like any other dysfunctional codependent relationship.
Wow.
Because you can't handle the pain. And the pain is I feel to the point where you literally get sick from not being connected, not not being invited to the family gathering, and having people not call you. Man, shoot. I guess the thing for me is I've been disowned so many times from my family. I done got used to it, you know. And in the long run, they always come back home because I'm the one who got sense, and the ones who don't, what can I do? What can I
Mm.
do? Does it hurt? Yeah. A lot of things that we need to do for ourselves hurt.
Right. Healing
Uh,
is painful.
yes.
Period.
Yeah. So that boundary stuff gets in the way, like you said, racial battle fatigue sometimes. That's part of the problem too. We haven't set those boundaries. We feel like we have to, we get put in a position where we're supposed to be representing all black people. Why might not feel the same as all black people?
Mm-hmm.
You know. And racial battle fatigue haven't had as much of an effect on me as it has on the other colleagues because I stopped caring a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now financially, did it have some effect on me? Yeah. Emotionally, not as much. And that's why, even when I worked for organizations, I still wanted to be a consultant and not an employee.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want folks dictating to me. And I always wanted to have an out. Right. And I tried as much as possible not to stay someplace because of clients.
Mm.
You know, and that might be selfish or unfair or whatever, but I learned that you know when I go, a lot of those places still functioned,
Mm-hmm.
still went on, and and I ended up doing probably better for folks when I moved on and did my own thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the tough parts. I think a lot of professionals do that. They stay even when they're not happy because of the clients and against their own internal gut feelings and best wishes. They'll just stick through something, or they'll wait a little longer to leave, or wait till the case is over, and that's a
Or
dangerous slippery slope. Go ahead.
or wait until they get put out because with racial battle fatigue, what happens is if you do stand up for yourself, right, and you work for one of them organizations who won't admit they are, who just want you to be black and shut up, and all of a
Mm.
sudden you start speaking up, all of a sudden you're a problem, and they
Yep.
make and they start making a case against you.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden you went back to the best employee of the month to the employee who's a problem, and
Right.
it happened just that quickly. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it happen. I've seen it happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I used to get the highest ratings at this one organization than any of my people in my same position. Man, I started asking questions. Then all of a sudden, well, Sam, we have a slight problem with this and this and this. But I'm not doing that no different than I was before,
Right.
right? You do what you got to do, you know, because they were bringing it up on my evaluation to hope that it changed my behavior. No, you do what you got to do, because I'm not doing nothing no different than I did before. Now all of a sudden it's a problem.
Right.
And then what it would get them even worse. What is it you want me to do?
Right.
They couldn't say. Unless you frustrate them enough and they get to a point, we just want you to be quiet, just show up and work. Oh, okay. Well, why didn't you just say that?
Mm.
So
Got a
yeah.
few minutes left. I think again, some final kind of thoughts for folks at this point in time. I think it's important that we have to be proactive with taking care of ourselves. I know I mentioned that earlier in the show. There are going to be moments where we are reactionary because stuff happens, life happens, comes out of nowhere. We got to do stuff. We got to respond to the stuff that shows up in our lives, but try to make sure that no matter what happens, that you're at least putting your best effort forward to reduce the amount of stress that it can be in your lives. I think the next thing is being able to identify what boundaries that you have and being able to articulate those to people is a key part of maintaining your well-being. Racial battle fatigue is like these mental gymnastics that people go through all the time, where they're consistently wondering how racism is going to show up in their life, or how people are interpreting things based on how they look or what they say, etc. And we just drive ourselves through this kind of grinder, this emotional grinder of being in the context of race. It's unfortunate, but it is a reality of our lives. And I hope that we can get to a place where that doesn't become such a stressor for us. But until then, we have to make sure that we're taking the best possible care of ourselves and stop caring so much about what white folks think about us. I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do when it comes to racial battle fatigue. And I think things can get better, but it's going to take a lot of work on us being and honesty on us dealing with how we show up in spaces and how much we let other people affect us. So, any final closing thoughts for you, Sam?
And not waste your time getting mad at other black staff that won't support you.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're just trying to survive this just like you are. They're just trying to survive it differently, right? They're just trying to ride it out. You know, I cannot spend my time being upset with them. They doing what they doing, right? But believe me, what you think is happening to you, it is. So now you got to figure out a way how you navigate that. You know, when do I need to speak up? How do I speak up? If you're the one in the room where all the other black folks or all the other people of color done geeked you up to be the spokesman, be willing to take the heat. If the person you're supposed to be the best spokesman for is you. Start with you. I had to learn that the hard way. I be the spokesman. I go in and talk for everybody, and then all of a sudden we get in the same room and they don't know nothing. They don't even know my name. Start with yourself. Start with your own boundaries, right? Set some parameters around yourself initially. It's not selfish, right? Call it what it is. I mean, if you're working with an organization and you're seeing some of this, no matter if you're black or white or whatever, let us know. We might be able to come in and help have that conversation. But the thing
Absolutely.
is do the best work you can on being honest with yourself. There is something happening. You are being gaslit. And when you're talking about this issue around race, protect yourself and set your own boundaries, and also watch out for setting your boundaries with folks who look like you.
Mm.
Because if you don't, you'll get set up even more sometimes.
Absolutely. What a great way to end another great broadcast brought to you by the Healing Brothers. It is time to deal with the pain. We will be back next week with another installment. Feel free to share this episode and others with people that you care about, and subscribe to us on YouTube as the Healing Brothers. And we'll be back next week. Peace.